Good morning, students. This morning I want to talk to you about part one of Rime of the Ancient Mariner. We start off with Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three. By thy long gray beard and glittering eye, now stoppeth, wherefore stoppest thou me? What we have here, we have three young men, good friends, and they're on their way to a wedding feast. Now they somehow missed the nuptials, but they are on the way to the party after the wedding, and they're almost to this party. They're very anxious to be there. They're excited. They can smell the food. They can hear the music and laughter from the party. One of these young men is related to the bride. They're very anxious to be there. But before they can enter the hall, a old man, he's very disheveled looking, and he stops one of the three. And the young man doesn't want to be stopped, and he's about your age, and just like you would, he says, "Hey, guy, why are you stopping me? I'm on my way to this party. You just let go of my arm, and let me go ahead to my party." And we go on. The bridegroom's doors are open wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set. Mayest hear the merry din. As I said, the young man is very anxious to get to his party. He wants to get away from this old man. We find out later this is our ancient mariner. He holds him with his skinny hand. "There was a ship," quoth he. "Hold off, and hand me, graybeard loon." Eftsoon his hand dropped he. And so the old man, instead of telling the young man, the guest to the wedding, why he is holding him, he begins to tell him a story. And the young man says, "Get your hands off me, you crazy old man. Get your hands off me." And the man does. He drops his hand. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. So the old sailor, the old mariner, does drop his hand, but he pins him with his eye. And it's a glittering eye. And the young guest is helpless against it. And he sits down on the stone bench outside of the wedding hall, unable to move, unable to continue. And it's kind of funny here because his friends go on into the party, great friends. But the wedding guest, the one who's related to the bride, sits down and listens like a 3-year-old child listening to a story, which the mariner continues to tell. The wedding guest sat on a stone, he cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. So the wedding guest has no choice, he must listen. The ship was cheered, the harbor cleared, the merrily did we drop below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. So the mariner, the old sailor, starts his story. He says, "It was a bright, beautiful day, and we were so happy to be starting our journey." We have to imagine that they were going out on trade. They were probably taking items or going to get items. We don't really know where they were going, but wherever they were going, they were happy to be going there. And everyone came out, "Hey, bye, bye, Dad, bye, brother." and they went through the harbor, and there was the church, and there was the lighthouse, and everything was just as it should be. And we continue. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he, and he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. A day and a night. Continue. We have the signaling of time passing. Higher and higher every day, till o'er the mast at noon, the wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. So the guest is saying that they're going closer to the equator. When you're close to the equator, you look up at noon, and the sun is just directly overhead. So he's telling them how time is passing, and but a loud noise happens. A bassoon, a musical instrument from the party, makes a noise, and the wedding guest tries to retch away and get away from the mesmerizing, glittering eye, and he almost does, but of course the mariner maintains control over him. The bride even comes to look for him. The bride had paced into the hall, red as a rose is she, nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. So people are kind of behind her, and they're like, "What are you doing, honey?" And she's, "I'm just looking into the hall, looking, see what's going on out there." And she looks around, and the mariner and the wedding guest look over at her, but alas, the wedding guest is unable to break free from the mariner and his glittering eye. Now, the mariner does not physically have, he's not physically touching the wedding guest. He just has control over him mentally with his glittering eye. So we realize this is a bit supernatural. This is one of our spiritual images that we can look at, because that glittering eye, because that's not natural to just look at someone and be able to maintain control over that person. Continuing. The wedding guest, he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. So the wedding guest is very unhappy. He's beating his chest. He wants to break free, but he cannot. And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his o'ertaking wings and chased us south along. Now, what's chasing them? A storm. They're caught up in a storm, and it pulls them off course. They don't want to go south, but if you're in a ship and you don't have a motor, when the wind comes and the current comes, you will go the way that it takes you, and it takes them south. And it takes them so far south that it's cold. With sloping mast and dipping prow, as who pursued with yell and blow, still treads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The ship drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward, we fled. So they're dipping their head against the wind. They have no choice. They're in a terrible storm, and it's pulling them off course and pulling them south, farther and farther south. And now there came both mist and snow. So they've entered the Arctic Circle, students. And it grew wondrous cold. And ice mast high came floating by, as green as emerald. So they're so far south that ice flows, and maybe they're passing by glaciers. And it's a very dangerous place to be if you're in a ship. Even now, that's not a place that you want to go if you don't have firm control over your ship and have the ability to navigate through these dangerous waters. And through the drifts, the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beast we ken. The ice was all between. So there's ice all around them. And they look, and there are no other human beings anywhere. There's nothing but ice and snow everywhere they look. And even worse than that, the ice is surrounding the ship, which puts them in grave danger. They don't know if they're going to live or die at this point. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It cracked and growled and roared and howled like noises in a swound. So the ice is cracking and growling and making noises, and the men are very frightened. At length did cross an albatross. Through the fog it came as if it had been a Christian soul. We hailed it in God's name. So they're in this terrible predicament. They're frightened, and they look up, and there's this bird. Now, you learned when you took notes on the Ancient Mariner that an albatross can routinely have a wingspan of 11 feet, but it only weighs about 25 to 30 pounds. So it's all feather and hollow bone in its wing. It's more wing than anything else, but it's a big, sweeping, majestic looking bird, and it's a good luck charm. And so if you're in a terrible predicament and you don't know if you're going to live or die, and you look up and you see a good luck charm, you're going to be happy. And so they look up, oh, look, hey, over here. And they're talking to this bird as though it were a person. And the bird acts like a person almost. He comes, he eats food that the men give him. He comes and he lands on the deck, and he interacts as though, in a bird-like way with the men. And all of a sudden, the helmsman, the guy who steers the ship, is able to steer through this ice that he had not been able to steer through before. And so the albatross is given credit for giving them the good luck that they need to be able to get through this dangerous situation. And a good south wind sprung up behind, the albatross did follow, and every day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. So the bird continues to come to the ship, to land on the prow, on the floor of the ship, and he interacts with the soldiers, the sailors, and as he does, good things are happening. As long as the bird is there, the south wind is blowing, which conversely, it's sending them north, it's sending them back on course, it's sending them where they want to be. So as long as this bird is there, good things are happening. And so the men are very solicitous to this bird. They're like, this is our good luck charm. We love this bird. In mist or cloud, on mast or shroud, it perched for vespers 9, whiles all the night through fog smote white, glimmered the white moonshine. So the bird is there day and night, and it stays with them, and they're so happy to have this bird. He's their pet. He's more than a pet. He's their savior. He's helping them to get through this terrible situation that they've gotten into. God saved the ancient mariner from the fiends that plagued thee thus. We've got some fiends, and they're plaguing the ancient mariner. Now, the ancient mariner in his story is not ancient. He's a young mariner. He's a very young man, and he's about to make a mistake. Why lookst thou so? The wedding guest says, what this terrible look is just come over you, ancient mariner. What is happening? The guest has gotten into the story. Why do you have this look on your face? And the ancient mariner says, well, I tell you, I took my crossbow and I shot that bird.